Zeely comments, muddied water represents the tainted mind in delusion. Clear water represents the pure mind after the attainment of Buddhahood. Waves represent the fact that the 3,000 are all function. The wetness represents the fact that the 3,000 are all substance, that is, Li, the nature. It must be understood that although the water is muddied in the case of the tainted mind, there too the entire wave is nothing but wetness. When the water is clarified, how could this be some other wave or some other wetness? Thus, both the wave and the wetness are always the same. This is to explain how the characteristics of the world dwell eternally. But characteristics are originally what is changing and moving. To make clear in what sense they are nonetheless eternal, it is necessary to elucidate the matter in terms of their position. The entirety of each characteristic is nothing but the position. So if the position is eternal, the characteristics are also eternal. Hence, the position is nothing other than the characteristics. Ziporyn comments, the unchanging suchness is not only the undepartable position of all dharmas, it is also precisely their characteristics as unchanging. Conversely, change and diversity are not only the characteristics of all dharmas, they are also precisely their suchness as changing and diverse. A characteristic is nothing but a position, that is, a set of boundaries. To be positioned is to be conditioned, to have a necessary outside. Conditions differ, but all are conditional. Any conditionality is a specific, differing conditionality. That is what it means to be conditional. To be conditional is to be specific, to be limited, to differ from others. But there is no differing as such. That would not be really differing, but still a universal sameness. To be merely determinate as such is still to be indeterminate. Wetness is the unchanging nature of the changing, differing waves. But the presence of waviness, or motion and function, is also the same, whether the water is muddied or clear. The universality of wetness is adduced merely to illustrate what the universal presence of a single attribute is like, what a universal is. The real point is to the universality of waviness, which is harder to see because of the difference in the shape and muddiness of the waves. But the wetness is precisely the waviness, and both remain the same everywhere. Both pervade the entire sea. This is because to be a wave is to be moving, to be always different, and it is only in this sense that the clarified waviness is the same waviness as the muddied waviness it used to be. To be a particular wave is to be wetness, is to be waviness, is to be non-dwelling, unrestrictable to any simple location, equally discoverable in any location. As Zanran has said, their position is to have some limited position, be some suchness, and this position is never transcended. The muddy wave is the same wave as the clear wave, in exactly the same sense in which even the muddy wave is the same as itself, because wave is just a way of indicating waviness. Hence, both sameness and difference apply to both the wave, that is, the waviness, and the wetness. As Zeely puts it, the whole substance is clear, because the two waves, muddy and clear, are just the one motion, just one unchanging nature of movingness. Ziporyn goes on to say, the point is not that there is a single shared essence, motion or waviness or wetness, that is the secret identity of each apparently different wave. Motion, waviness, is indeed the nature of a wave. That is, its intrinsic characteristic that identifies it as a wave, which is always so of it no matter what changes it may undergo. But being a wave is just being waviness. To be a wave is to be waviness. And even the identification of a single wave and two consecutive moments of muddiness is a partial construal, focusing abstractly on the sameness or waviness at the expense of the difference, both of which are equally applicable and, strictly speaking, synonymous. Any other wave is the same wave to just the same extent as this wave is the same wave in any two consecutive moments. That is, provisionally, although different is an equally accurate description in both cases. Any particular instance of conditionality co-arises with all instances. This is because conditionality cannot function as a normal universal, which remains other to its instances, which remains unchanging and the same as against its changing, differing instances. With this universal, both the universal and the instances are eternal, and simultaneously both the universal and the instances are constantly changing. The universal, too, constantly changes, can never be one. Li also is multiple, just as much as it is singular. Both difference and sameness are applicable at every level here, both purity and taint, both mutability and constancy. The muddiness is there from the beginning. But, as Zili says, muddiness is not the nature of water. This is not because the nature of water is rather purity or unchangingness, a single pure nature, but because its nature is to be non-dwelling as either muddy or clear. Its nature is finitude as interpenetration, determinancy as indeterminacy, as the interchangeability of the two, the three truths. All the waves are both defiled and pure, because any single wave has the nature of moving from muddy to clear and from clear to muddy. It is the same or different wave that is muddy or is clear. In sum, given that the one shared nature is movingness or impermanence or dependent origination or conditionality or determinate finitude itself, both the nature and the characteristics are eternal. The characteristics are, in the metaphor, the shape of a particular wave, its frothiness, its motion, its history, its progression. The difference between this same characteristic as pure and as muddied rests simply in how it is seen to be related to the other characteristics. Nothing else about it changes. Muddiness here equals simply separation, obstructions, severing of contexts. In this sense, muddiness is not the nature of water, because it is not the nature of waves, the real nature of movingness itself. Mud here stands for the inertness, the solidity, the separation of the solid as opposed to the liquid. It is not the nature of being a characteristic, qua characteristic, to be isolated from other characteristics. That is, this is not the nature of being finite, of inhabiting a limited position. The muddiness is a non-disclosure of the real nature of what limitedness is. That is to say, what a limit is, what finitude is, what conditionality is, what locatedness is, what determinateness is. For to be determinate is, in Tiantai, to be locally coherent, which is to be globally incoherent. To be determinate is to be indeterminate. To be limited is to be connected to all other contexts. To be separated is actually another way of saying to be connected. Separation, this thing being itself and none other, is only coherent in the context of its articulation within a group of other things, other characteristics. This thing being itself is a manifestation of its interconnectedness with other things, its inseparability from them. The three truths is a way of showing that the notion of a hard and fast border between any two characteristics is ultimately self-contradictory. They can be neither fixed, internal, nor external to one another. In simple terms, this means that the what of any event or thing never changes, any more than its nature does.